Hi, I'm Alex, and today you get a different view because today I am going to start on a rather long project of creating a Tolkien world. And what I mean is like history here, maps there, all sorts of everything. Will the final product end up being even remotely like that? Probably not. But I thought it would be fun to try. So the first step that I'm going to take toward that is to create a map. Now, will I get it done in this video? Probably not. But I will definitely put a picture at the end of the final piece. I have created a few maps before, following a tutorial that I don't even know if it exists anymore because it was years ago. But what I can remember, I will share with you. So the first thing I recall is they suggested using things like when you want to create borders, if you ever find that your borders look too repetitive or obviously drawn, to use rice or dried lentils, pour it onto the page, and you can scooch them around to create the line you want and outline that because they're objects that aren't perfectly shaped. So that's what we're going to be doing with some rice because that's what I have available to me. Now, for those of you who may be wondering, the story I'm planning on working on, that I'm doing all this for, and yes, it is a very messy process, is going to be what essentially equates to an epic fantasy that involves pretty obviously people with powers. And I don't actually have a lot of it worked out yet, which you would think I probably should if I'm jumping right into making maps and that sort of thing. But that's not me. I'm not in for that. The little things you see me off to the side, I know you can't see everything, but you'll get a picture at the end, is me creating what equates to islands. Now, after you've got that down, I'm going to use a pencil just for the sake of not getting ink on food. You go around the outside of it. So I'm going to start up here. And you don't have to absolutely go around everything. Like, I don't want a giant lake here. So I'm going to go around these. And you just kind of follow the edges created by whatever you pour down. The first time I did this, I didn't have anything like that. So I actually used dice, which was interesting because they're all square. So every landmass I created was still kind of angular. While you're watching me do this, the original idea for this story came from a music video called Mama by a group called EXO. If you know anything about Korean music, you don't need me to say anything. For those of you who don't watch Korean music, and it was originally the storyline that they had going for the group. Each of them had powers. And there was, you know, it got confusing for a while because even I was like, okay, wait, who's the bad guy in this? Basically, evil forces force the powers to split into 12 people, and each one of them represented a power. And I thought that was the coolest thing. Now, if you notice, the way I'm holding it is kind of allowing the pencil to jump around. And I feel that makes it far more organic looking. But recently, I've noticed they're probably not going to ever finish that storyline. Because some of the members left and there's a whole thing going on. So I wanted to create what essentially was my own version of that. Obviously not directly copying, but they don't really own the rights to things like Hey, someone can heal. Hey, someone can control fire. We all know that there's a bajillion and one of those around. And some of the ones that just didn't work within the realm of what I was doing just kind of flat out changed. If you're curious, I would normally go back and erase that, but I think that's a cool little thing to have that inlet on this little island. Now we go in, and I think I want this space to be a lake or inlet, whatever. I think I want one here. A little one there. And maybe I'll mark it off now. But I think I want between these two areas to be a river that kind of follows the natural course that this took. All right, so we have the basics drawn. Now, this is the part where it gets messy. I gotta put this roast back. Okay, now that we have our outline in, also I apologize if the lighting gets really weird. I've got an overhead light that's very not bright. Once we have the outline in, this is where we start putting in the major landforms like mountains, if I recall correctly. One of the things I thought of for this story was that I would like to bring back the idea of that group of 12, but maybe start them off in what essentially equates to two separate factions. Maybe something happened in this world, the people are separated based on something. So the one side I want to put into more mountain and foresty areas, while the other side is basically they've leveled the land out for building and stuff. We're going to start with mountains and forests. Now I have this river here, and because it runs down, it's going to have to come from somewhere, which means there's going to have to be mountains somewhere in this area. So let's go with maybe the mountains start in here and kind of run along here a bit. I don't know a lot about geography, and I'm probably going to have to do a lot more research on the way to know how this should properly go. But for now, it's a good starting point. I think maps are really important to have if you're going to do a story that involves a lot of travel, even in like more modern stories, because you can kind of forget, oh, hey, they've got a really long way to travel. If they're going from here all the way over here, that's not going to take 2 days. You're looking more like on foot, like 3 months, maybe more. Depends on how used to travel, I guess, or walking they are. And then we'll thin them out as they come up here to kind of indicate that they start tapering off. And we'll do some more over this way, maybe. Maybe they're those type of mountains that's like came through here. Maybe we'll do a few toward the top here and then circle it kind of around. Now, one of the things that I found out, or I noticed as I was going through Tolkien maps, because that is the whole purpose of this, is to create a world similar to that, is that his map of the Shire was actually pretty much England. All of his maps were like fantasy versions of real maps. So he had a starting point. And that may be something I end up doing later. It really depends on both how much I like what I'm currently working on and how much the story evolves, because it may require a more open or realistic sort of mapping. So I apologize if you can't see my marks. I try to keep them fairly light until I'm sure that that's where I want them to be. That way I can erase them later. So we have the mountains in. Next we're going to go with the forest. Although I'm pretty sure you're supposed to go with rivers next. Like this lake has to feed from something. This has to feed from something unless it's man-made. So all of these would feed out and then they would feed down from the mountains. Why don't we do that then, just to make life easier. I do like letting my pencil kind of bounce as I do rivers, just because rivers aren't going to be perfectly straight and they're not going to be perfectly flat. I still kind of struggle with making them too perfect. Now, the other thing I know is all rivers do feed out. It's just a matter of whether you see where they feed out to, because they may go underground. So not all of these have to feed out to the water because they'll feed out underground, but some of them definitely, there should definitely be more than, like, say, this one that goes out. We may take a river out from these mountains here and bring them out. And then just leave these as what appear to be lakes, or leave these as lakes. And in this particular instance, I don't need to be overly picky yet. That's something that can come later once I'm more certain about things, because it may be entirely a thing that these mountains have to move later on. Is that not the most geologically aware person that exists? Now, what we can do is take this river through the mountains, let it do that, and it kind of implies that it might at some point feed into this. I think I want to take out this river here. It just feels a little forced. Okay, forests. Now this is going to be, like I said, part of the divide in this whole world, because those who live in the forest very much keep to a more, they build houses and they do that sort of thing, but they're not clearing land to do it. They try to stay out of sight of the other faction, for lack of a better word. So everything they do is very nature hidden. So you can definitely tell that looking at a map from above, you're like, well, there's a giant forest there and there. I know this faction's probably not in there, but there might be other people there. I think I want, okay, you can't see it on camera, but there is an island off to the side here. I think I definitely want that to be a heavily forested area. And I'm just going to do kind of like little squiggly bubbles for forest right now. So one of the key features between, well, not key features, but both sides do have abilities, but it's almost like it's assumed that the one faction is like evil. Not evil, but not, more like your petty thieves and that kind of thing. I know there won't be trees along the mountains, but there could definitely be a series of trees in here. Not super thick, but definitely like a line of them. while the other faction that does a lot of the clearing and this and that, they're kind of what you would call your high... I don't like how that looks. Good job, May. Okay, we're going to change the way I do trees, just because I don't like the way that looks. They're definitely like the people you go, oh, you have money. Oh, you definitely grew up not needing to worry about things. And no, that is not a statement against anyone. Don't take it that way, people. It just so happens that a lot of the time, your merchants and that sort of thing, people who don't have to hide, can take more of a wealthy route. People who people look at and go, oh, well, you must be bad because you're from whatever. Less options to them. No, I'm not starting anything on this channel. We're not doing that. We're not here for that. We're here for world building. One of the things I wanted to do with this is that half of the group is part of the for what, lack of a better term at the moment, the darker side of things. Mostly because they're the ones who are constantly hiding, so I guess shadows maybe? While the other half is from the other side, and one of the things they're going to have to deal with is the fact that they are very different, but not different at all. There's a lot of preconceived things going on that they're going to have to get over to deal with what I have planned. Which sounds awful, but let's be real. We're writers. We do awful things to people in books. My theory for how I'm going to do this is actually that for the first part of the book, they're actually still going to retain the fact that they're two different groups. And then later on, they're going to come together into a whole group, which kind of makes sense if you think about it, because up until the point that they meet as a whole group, they're complete strangers to each other. They're not gonna just, you know, whatever. I think I'm gonna do another group of trees down here, and then maybe intersperse a few along here, and then we can get into the settlements. I think for right now I might just draw the trunks because it's quicker, and then I'll go back and actually draw everything in to show you guys the final piece. But the whole point is that these differences kind of divide not only the people but the land. Okay, so next, the settlements or cities, whatever you want to call them, and these would distinctly be for obviously the people that don't live in the woodsy areas. They would be more like what you think of, like, they don't do castles so much, but they do the big manor houses and that sort of thing. So we'll put a settlement here. I'm just doing big squares with lines, kind of like fields for them for now, because that's kind of like the indicator that, okay, this is a land that's been farmed, it's been built up. There's going to be a big one here and some smaller ones around it, because here there's going to be a like a docking sort of thing. So your shipyardy sort of thing. So obviously a lot of people are going to be around that. There are going to be a couple of settlements that are closer to the forested areas because it was a necessity versus something they actually wanted to do. But they're definitely going to be on the smaller side. And even though it looks close on the map, it's actually not. That's mostly because I never set up an actual, like, oh, this is this many feet or whatever. I definitely want to come into play something like there are some people who do get along between the two groups, either out of necessity or something happened and there's things going on there. It's definitely not the group that's coming out of the major settlements of these people. They were taught things are very black and white, you know, very clean cut. They're good, we're good, they're bad, whatever. And as they go, they realize it's just not the case. Because nothing's ever that clear. Now, I have an island down here that's empty and a couple here, and I think I want to leave them empty in the sense of settlements and leave them more open to maybe that's a hunting area or something like that. Now, I do need to have a couple of special locations. I haven't come up with any of this story other than a premise yet, so we're kind of winging everything. Maybe a couple of little houses that could be like your interim people. Like they're not for one side or the other, so they kind of go back and forth. In which case we'll probably put one of them here. And that could give us an excuse to have a settlement. Well, we can have them here and they could interact with these people. We're going to have one of them mountainy houses here. At least one homestead sort of area that's a bunch of people who would be willing. I think I want to have them along the river though. Maybe that way they can help later on. So maybe here. Yeah, that would work. I think that might do for now. I'll probably ink and color some of the parts that I know I definitely want. But I want to leave it open enough that I can go back and add things later as I discover things going on in the story. So, I will definitely add a picture of the finished product of this at the end of this. Let me know if you know any good videos about, or any articles, anything about map making, because I'd love to learn more about this because I actually find it a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!